What's wrong? Oh, I'm sorry, hon. I know. And this time of year, too. It's okay. Yeah, of course. Do you want to talk about it? Or... Oh. Okay. Just hang out? Yeah. Maybe rest a little bit? You should rest. Okay, let me see. I might have some things here that could help. I have the cutest little match bottle. I'm running very low on matches, though. So, let's see. I also have this little tea light that a friend of mine gave me. Oh, it smells so good. Let's light that. This might take me a few tries, we'll see. Set this over here. Awesome. I went to the bookstore the other day and I found this very cool book that I'm very excited about. And I'm thinking maybe we could read a chapter or two from it. Sound good? Okay. It is called 3 Messages and a Warning. Contemporary Mexican Short Stories of the Fantastic. Now, some of these I've read, and I will say some of these are a little bit spooky, but I have a nice one picked out that I think you might enjoy that's on the less spooky side. This one is called Murillo Park by Augustine Cadena. Let's start. Monday to Friday, past 2 in the afternoon, at one of the shaded benches in Murillo Park, there was an appointment no one had made formally. Its witnesses were the poplars and jacarandas that are still there offering their freshness. The office allowed me 2 hours for lunch, from 2 until 4. It was a lot of time for a 40-year-old bachelor used to eating quickly and alone. So it was that. Having finished up at a nearby lunch counter, there wasn't anything else to do but kill time by walking the streets and looking at shops. Although, in this once elegant but now down on its luck neighborhood, there wasn't much to see. The houses looked rickety, like those women who were lovely in their younger days and decades later preserved only the scent of wilted flowers. That's how the houses were there. Tall, shady, silent, painted in a scabby color under the smothering ivy with double sloping roofs and the shutters always closed. On the main avenue, there weren't many shops. After a few visits, I knew everything they had to sell. There was only a watchmaker's shop, some shoe stores, a bridal boutique, and a small passageway full of coin dealers and herbalists. But there were many government buildings. I don't like parks. They resemble refuges for bums, people looking for work in the newspapers, exhibitionist couples. Worst of all at midday, when they fill with teenagers away from school in their lunch hour. But that day, the first day, I gave in. I gave in because of the heat. It was 38 degrees Celsius, and because there was nothing else to do, and because I'd had a bad day. In the morning, before leaving my house, I had an argument with my sister over some stupidity. We were 2 singletons whose characters had been embittered by the bachelorhood and spinsterhood and a lack of dreams. Then, in the office, I had to redo a job because of my boss, a girl just out of university and full of herself. So that's how it happened that I went to Murillo Park, found a shady bench, and sat down. It was fortunate that there weren't many people, a couple in their 40s, pale and about 1.5 meters tall, though maybe the woman was a little bit taller. A man of about 30, olive-skinned and with enormous gold bracelet on his wrist. An older woman, and on the same bench as her, but at its opposite end, a handsome young man wearing a cheap and badly cut suit. Strangely, they were all asleep. It was because of the heat, I assumed. Without realizing it, I also fell asleep. I was in a good mood the rest of the afternoon and trying to come up with an explanation. I told myself it had been many years since I slept so peacefully as I had for that spell in Murillo Park. It shouldn't be surprising that I returned the next day. Yes, I returned the next day and the next, and then every day from Monday to Friday. The siesta under the trees became my daily and obligatory portion of earthly pleasure. In time, I came to have my own bench, almost my own, one that everyone recognized was for me, and they respected that. A bench that waited for me every afternoon at the same hour, like a faithful girlfriend. Of course, on occasions, I had to share it with strangers to me and my fellow sleepers. Once I even had to listen to a lover's quarrel barely 30 centimeters from my right ear. We came to know each other. We didn't converse much as we went there to nap, but we managed to learn a few things. Each other's names, where we worked. For example, Martinez, the guy with the gold bracelet, preferred to sleep in the park rather than his office because he snored and farted at the same time. And nobody gave him a hard time. Nobody felt the need to wear a mask. The couple of near dwarves had lost hope of having a child after who knows how many tests and treatments. They worked in the same building, though not in the same office, and they liked to watch the kids coming out of the high school. They went there, sat on their bench, and closed their eyes to engender in their minds their possible offspring. Martinez was fed up with his wife. He did everything he could to avoid her, but he wouldn't think of divorce. On Fridays, instead of taking his siesta, he would visit a young and attractive woman who accepted money from him. As for the young man, Ramiro, he had fallen in love with one of his co-workers in the ministry. He asked her advice about how to dress, which cologne to use, where to take her, and what gifts to give her. This is how I met Jorge. The older lady I had seen that first afternoon. Jorge was her last name, not her first, but that is what she liked to be called. She was a widow, still comely, with a voice that betrayed her vice of smoking while possessing velvety nuances enhancing its femininity. She dressed elegantly and had a large bosom with stretch marks which glistened in the sun thanks to her décolletage. "I'm much obliged," she said distantly, as if with nostalgia, the first time we spoke, when, nodding on the bench, she had dropped her magazine and I had bent down to retrieve it. It was printed in sepia. I couldn't help but see the title, Mexico Today. I had never seen that one in the kiosks. "It's nothing," I said modestly, and before she had a chance to nod off, I took my chance to start a conversation. "I've seen you around here. Do you work nearby?" She fanned herself a little with the magazine and smiled. "I work in the Monte Carlo." "Do you know it?" "The Monte Carlo? It seemed to me I'd heard that name somewhere, but I couldn't place it. Don't tell me you haven't heard of it." "Well, I'm in charge of the coat rack and other small things. I start at 6 in the afternoon." "Ah," was the only thing I could think of to say. I was quiet for a moment, looking ahead, where 2 high school girls were teasing each other with a kind of slang that, in my time, only men would use. I was embarrassed that Jorge, so ladylike, should hear this. But Jorge wasn't hearing anything now. She was snoring. She slept with her mouth open and nearly falling over onto my shoulder. Her magazine had once again fallen from her hands and was coming apart in the middle, in the puddle under the bench. All that afternoon, and even into the night, once in bed, I thought about this woman and asked myself, where did she work? Why was she dressed and made up like that? What were the magazines she was reading about? What was her life like? There was something about her that intrigued and attracted me very much. It seemed to me that I had dreamt about her once, when I was a boy or a teenager, a dream with the scent of orange trees in blossom. The next day we met again. I couldn't wait to ask her the questions on the tip of my tongue. "Tell me about yourself, Jorge. Tell me about your life." "I have made many mistakes," she answered in a conclusive tone, and she closed her eyes without saying more. I didn't know when exactly she fell asleep. They were there on the bench, breathing deeply through her red painted lips. The next day, I did not see her, but I sat next to Martinez and asked him about her. I haven't noticed her, he said. What does she look like? I described her for him, but it was useless. No, well, the truth is, I don't remember her. After that came a long Saturday without news of Jorge, nor any way to talk with her. Had I made her mad? I asked myself several times. My sister noticed and she asked me what was wrong. I told her the whole story. What kind of crazy person have you found? The Monte Carlo was a nightclub back in the 40s. It must be a different one, I said, mentally erasing the possibility that there was something strange about Jorge. A new one with the same name. And then her name, Jorge. Don't you suspect she might be a lesbian, Ducky? I already told you, that's her last name. In the first place, I was annoyed by her manner of talking to me. In the second, I hated being called that ridiculous nickname which my mother had given me when I was a child. All right then, no need to get upset. We were quiet for a long time. We'd just eaten, and though it was turned on in front of us, the television had lost our attention. Like every Saturday, my sister and I rested for a while after lunch, and then we got ready to go to the neighborhood movie theater. There, I relaxed. I stopped thinking about silly things, and I enjoyed the picture. Then we went for donuts and hot chocolate, another thing we did every Saturday. Finally, we went home in peace, and there, in peace, I would fall asleep but never dream. Sunday went by quickly. That was the day we cleaned the house. The following Monday, at last, I saw Jorge. Trying to act disinterested, I asked her what she'd done on Saturday. I went to the movies with my sister, she said with satisfaction. Now we're getting somewhere, I thought. She has a sister and she likes movies, just like me. What a coincidence. I also went to the movies with my sister. Maybe we were in the same room at the same time without realizing it. I went to the opening of A Different Dawn, and you? We went to see The Terminator. That's what they were showing at the theater near my house. Ah, Jorge answered distractedly. I haven't heard of that one. And the one you went to see, did it have anyone famous in it? Of course, it had Julio Bracco and starred Andrea Palma and Pedro Armendariz. It sounded like one of the pictures from the 40s they'd showed on Channel 4, but I didn't say anything. Jorge didn't seem to want to talk. She fell asleep right away. That night, my sister asked what had happened to her. I didn't tell her everything. I left out the part about the movie. I didn't want her to annoy me again, and she didn't. Jorge and I continued to see each other on that bench. Days went by, weeks. There was a moment when I tried to get more out of her. She preferred to hide, to turn my questions around on me. I answered, recounting my life without secrets. What did I have that was worth hiding? We became friends. More than friends. That is, we grew very close, very much alike in some sense. We both liked peanut candies with caramel and the candied figs the street vendor would take from bench to bench, but we never managed to have what one would call a romance. We never even saw each other away from those benches. On the verge of suspecting Jorge might be crazy, I repressed the thought. It was that every month she brought a new issue of Mexico Today, and every time I asked if I could see it, I saw that it was 50 years old and advertised things that were no longer available. Ipana toothpaste, the Business and Banking School of Palma 27, Printemps de Paris perfume, bourgeois red lipstick that purportedly avoided the painted look, Quina La Roche tonic wine, Eno fruit salt, and who knows how many other equally strange things. Maybe there could have been something more between us, but I didn't want it. I was afraid. I was afraid because I had dreamt about her when I was little and I didn't want to ruin this dream. One afternoon, taking advantage of the fact that everyone in the park was asleep and there was no one to see us, I took Jorge's hand in mine. She looked at me intensely, her eyes very bright under the painted blue shadow of her eyelids, and she said to me, "Next week, Maestra Lara will play at the Monte Carlo. Why don't you go? I can get you one of the best seats, and look, if you're not too sleepy to stay up late and you want to wait for me, afterwards we could go out somewhere. The Smyrna closes later. Maestra Lara. Was she talking about Augustine Lara? That was too much. And nonetheless, it didn't matter. Truly, it didn't matter. I was able to keep holding her gaze, but not her hands. I was about to tell her, I'm afraid our friendship is doomed not to last, but I sensed that she wouldn't understand me. Her hands now free, she put one on my thigh and winked at me. Come on, you'll see. You won't regret it. Although my heart started to beat fast, there was something in this gesture that seemed repulsive to me. I repressed it, relegating in the depths of my consciousness. It didn't fit with the woman I had dreamt of when I was a boy. A woman still young, subtle, and beautiful, despite the dream being now very old. Instead, Jorge, why don't you come have tea with us? My sister makes fritters. I'll telephone you soon, she said dryly, but she didn't call. She didn't call, and furthermore, she stopped coming to the park. What if I upset her, I asked. Maybe I said something I shouldn't have, or maybe she thought me very silly. Why didn't I take advantage of the opportunity she was giving me? Anyone else in my place would have known what to do. I reproached myself continually. Every afternoon in Murillo Park I hoped to see her, and at night I had elaborate fantasies of scenes in which Jorge and I found each other again in her world, not this so imperfect world. I saw her dressed in a vaporous organdy dress, with very high heels, seated on a black velvet cushion smoking. We enjoyed ourselves until midnight in exciting places, after which we would begin to kiss on the streets. Leaning against antique automobiles, slick with the night's dew, drunk and happy, we would lurch out into the fog to walk down a street with no end. I asked Martinez about her again. I asked all the others. They not only had not seen her, they said they didn't know her. They're making fun of me, I thought. How could it be possible that not one of them had noticed her? She, with whom I had shared my siesta on so many afternoons. No, they insisted. They didn't know her. They hadn't seen me talking to anyone on the bench. They hadn't remembered any woman of that description. I began to spend my period of my siesta looking for Jorge. I found the yellow pages from recent years, and there I looked for the Monte Carlo. There were 4 motels that rented rooms by the hour and some public baths under the same name, all in different parts of the city. The time I had for my siesta wasn't enough. I had to invest more and more hours into investigating her whereabouts. I, who always took refuge at home at twilight, got to know the city at night. I got to know the horrible places, none with an employee named Jorge handling the coat check. They didn't even have a coat check. Finally, I confirmed the address of the old Monte Carlo. There wasn't anything there anymore. Nothing. I regretted being so stupid. Out of nothing but shyness, I had never asked Jorge for her telephone number. Though she had mine. She never called me, however, and I never found her, and after some months I returned to my routine of siestas in Murillo Park and quit fantasizing. I went back to my friends, Martinez, the couple, young Ramiro. For 7 years, these people and I met from Monday to Friday in Murillo Park, sleeping 30 minutes on each occasion. Therefore, we must have shared some 1,800 hours of sleep, 75 days. Sleep is the most intimate of all acts, the one that requires the most true trust in others. A sleeping human is a vulnerable creature who has voluntarily abandoned himself to the mercy of others. Young Ramiro was the first to desert. He found a better job in another part of the city. The couple retired, yet for a while they kept coming to take their siesta with us out of habit. Eventually they stopped coming altogether. Others took their place, an ex-alcoholic, or a dry drunk, as he called himself, a neighborhood vendor who suffered from gout, a divorced woman full of resentment. I never discovered anything more about Jorge. Then one day, as I interpret the event, she said farewell to me. Here's what happened. Feeling that I was too old to be a novice in matters of women, and since I couldn't find anyone to keep me company, I overcame my embarrassment and called a house of prostitution that advertised in the newspaper. I asked if among the girls there might be one of around 50 years. They told me no. They were all less than 24, but that they could give me the telephone number of another house where I would find what I was looking for. I wrote down the number. It took me 2 weeks to bring myself to call, and finally I made an appointment. A gratuitous act, and took a taxi to the establishment. Embarrassed by that the driver would know where I was going, it wasn't easy for me to give him the address. It turned out to be a rundown place. There was a rose-colored parlor with a sofa covered in plastic where one sat down to see the women presented one at a time. As they came down, I looked around the place, trying to keep calm. I noticed that in the back there was a large radio and a console on top of which there was a photograph of Pedro Infante in a wooden picture frame, chipped to the edges. I told myself, there's something of her here. And when the girls had all come down, I felt happy. They were all mature. The youngest must have been over 40. Suddenly I wasn't nervous anymore. I just felt anxious to choose. The woman who led me upstairs to her room looked like Jorge. The likeness was very close, but it wasn't her. She possessed neither her skin, warmed by the 2 o'clock sun, nor her perfume, nor her velvety voice. I paid a lot, and I tried to get the most out of it. When I came down the stairs on my way out, the woman had turned on the radio. I noticed that it was turned to ZEW, The Intimate Hour with Augustine Laura. Just then, a woman whose voice was the same as Jorge's called the station and said, "I want to request the song Impossible, dedicated to Ducky, from a friend." She didn't have to say her name. I knew it was she, and I even forgave her the Ducky, although I couldn't help wondering how she knew about my ridiculous nickname. Her message gave me back a peace of mind. I knew that there was no such program as ZEW nor any other station. I knew that Augustine Lara had died in 1970 and that the Monte Carlo, the Smyrna Club, and all those places ceased to exist a long time ago. But sometimes, all of a sudden, as I passed by one of those businesses that still had an old radio, The Intimate Hour with Augustine Lara would come on. And almost without static, I would stop for a few minutes to hear the people calling in, asking for dedicated songs. When I hear that velvety voice that calls me Ducky, I close my eyes and once again breathe in the freshness of the poplars and jacarandas while I hold Jorge's age-spotted, nicotine-stained hands in mine. I love that one. I think it's so lovely. I think it's also fun because it's a little bit mystical. How are you feeling? Better. Good. Maybe now you can rest, take a nap maybe. Yeah, of course. I'm always here. Alright, I'll leave you be. It was good to see you. I hope tomorrow's a better day.